Hello everyone, this is Colin once again. I'm making another video response to Ahmed's Quran 3. The topic of this video is Jews, Killers of Prophets, Part 129. Now, in this video response, I'm going to refute the idea that the user put forward that the Jews never killed any of their prophets. Now, he quotes several passages here. He quotes Surah 287, 281, 321, 3, 181, 4, 155, and 570, and among other passages. Now, in these passages, there is a reference to the idea that the Jews rejected faith and or killed the prophets. Now there's both phrases are sometimes used in the same verse. Sometimes it's just they reject faith, others it's just they slayed the prophets. Now this user makes the assertion that there is no evidence, that Muslims do not provide any evidence, that the Quran does not provide any evidence, that there is no evidence that the Jews killed their prophets. And I would first like to note that this is probably one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever made. Now, let me just note for my Jewish viewers, this is not an attack on Judaism. This is not an attack on the Jews. I'm actually quoting Jewish sources amongst the Bible, the Christian Bible, to show that there were a section of the Jews that killed their own prophets. Now, first off, the Babylonian Talmud mentions that Isaiah was killed by the Jews. He was stripped naked, turned upside down, and then sawed in half. So Isaiah was actually murdered. He was a prophet. He was murdered by the Jews. This is in their own Babylonian Talmud. We then also have John the Baptist, who is considered a prophet by Christians and Muslims, and the fact is King Herod had John the Baptist's head cut off. He had him beheaded. So he was killed by the Jews, and he was a prophet. Then you say in your video, well, Jesus was killed by the Romans. Well, even if the Romans were the ones that actually physically killed him, nailed him to the cross, the Jews were the ones that arrested him. The high priest and the Sanhedrin court were the ones that initiated his betrayal, initiated his interrogation, initiated him to be handed over to Pilate to be executed, and wanted him dead. So this is their rejecting of the prophets and their slaying of the prophets as illustrated by the Quran. Now, you mentioned a lot of other things in this video, and I don't really feel like it's relevant to go into them at this time. This is the most important point here, is that you say that the Jews did not kill their prophets. I'd also like to point out a non-Quranic source that says the Jews killed their prophets. This is actually the Gospel of Matthew. I can find my reference here. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23. This is Jesus talking, by the way. This is a very interesting passage. So, for those of you who are watching this and you don't think the Quran is a good enough evidence to support the idea that the Jews were accused of killing their prophets, then how about we use the New Testament? Matthew chapter 23, starting at verse 29. Jesus is speaking to the Pharisee, and he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you testify against yourselves that you are descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up, then, the measure of your ancestors, you snakes, you brood of vipers. How can you escape being sentenced to hell? Therefore I send you prophets, sages, and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town, so that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zacharias, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come upon this generation." So, therefore, we have Jesus Christ himself accusing the Jews of killing the prophets. So, I don't know where you, Ahmed's Quran 3, get the assertion that the Quran is making up allegations against the Jews. I do not see where you're getting that from. When I have provided you sources, we have the Babylonian Talmud, the murder of Isaiah, the martyrdom of Isaiah at the hands of the Jews. We have King Herod's murder, beheading of the prophet Yahya in the Quran. He's referred to as Yahya, but he is John the Baptist in English. The attempted murder and imprisonment of Jesus Christ, and we have the accusation of Jesus Christ himself in the Gospel of Matthew, saying the Jews killed the prophets. So this is not something that the Quran is just alleging, but the Quran's alleging that the Jews killed their prophets is a true statement, according to the proof I've just brought forward. So this is not Muhammad just pulling things out of thin air. This is an actual, legit statement that the Jews not only killed their prophets, but they also rejected their prophets. Many of the prophets were ignored by the kings of Israel at many times. And you mention a whole list of prophets that are not mentioned in the Quran. By the way, Ezekiel is mentioned in the Quran according to Jewish tradition. But the Quran makes a statement. It says, we believe in all of the prophets. It says every nation was sent a prophet. And therefore it says that we have rehearsed to you the signs of the things unseen, stories of some of the prophets, but not all of them. So the Quran mentions some, but not all. And you say, why was Muhammad concerned about Hebrew prophets? Prophets that were not even sent to the Arabs. Right here you are showing an ignorance of Islamic theology, because if you knew anything about Islamic theology, you would know that that Muslims believe in all of the prophets sent to all of mankind. That means prophets sent to the Hebrews, the Jews, to the Arabs, to all of mankind. But of course, you don't mention this, sadly enough, in your video. So thank you everyone for watching. Peace be with you all.